dear learners. I welcome you all to this MOOC on gender and the media. This is the 25th unit of the Module 10 on mediated stereotypes. This particular unit is on basic concepts of stereotypes. While discussing this topic, we will try to make an attempt to gain an insight on the definition and meaning of stereotypes, to explore different types and characteristics of stereotypes, and lastly, to understand the meaning of stereotypes as theorized by Walter Lippmann and Orrin Clapp. The influential role of media in shaping public perceptions and social constructs cannot be denied. Media serves as a powerful agent in framing reality by influencing what they think about by selecting and emphasizing certain issues. The way information is structured, presented, and contextualized impacts audience interpretation, potentially reinforcing stereotypes or biases. Prolonged exposure to specific media narratives can shape individuals' worldviews, leading to the internalization of social constructs. Individuals often model behaviors and attitudes seen in media, which means biased or stereotypical representations can shape societal attitudes in real life. Because of this power, media creators must be very conscious about the content they produce to prevent reinforcing prejudices or marginalizing specific groups. Our discussion will provide an exposure to an understanding of what is stereotype and how it affects our understanding of the reality. Let us try now to understand the meaning of stereotype. What is a stereotype? The term stereotype originated from relief printing technology, where paper mache mold carrying the impression of a composed type is used to make new cylindrical printing plates. In general, stereotypes are simple, overgeneralized, widely accepted ideas or images which are often resistant to change. The Oxford Dictionary defines stereotype as a widely held but fixed and oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of person or thing. The Cambridge Dictionary defines stereotype as a set idea that people have about what someone or something is like, especially an idea that is inaccurate. Stereotype is a generalized opinion or an image about a person, not by the person's behavior or conduct, but because of that person's association to a particular social group or community which is considered as a homogeneous sect, and it can include both favorable and unfavorable traits. According to Snyder, human brains use stereotypes to simplify the social world by making it more predictable and easier to understand. Stereotypes help people organize information and create a stable view of reality. Let us now try to understand how and why are stereotypes formed. Stereotypes are formed as a way for the human mind to simplify and categorize complex social realities. They emerge from cognitive processes, social interactions, cultural influences, and media representations. Stereotypes help individuals organize information quickly, making sense of their surroundings without having to analyze every detail. However, while they serve as mental shortcuts, they can also reinforce biases, perpetuate social inequalities, and distort perceptions of different groups. As far as cognition and behavioral aspects of human beings are concerned, our brain remembers and categorizes things of the past and recalls and reproduces acts by imitating the models that it has seen in the past, shortly called as the traditional behaviorism. Bandura's social learning theory states that learning is not solely based on direct experience or reinforcement, as behaviorist theories claim, but also occurs through observing others in social interactions, media, and daily life. Bandura's concept of reciprocal determinism explains how human behavior is influenced by a continuous interaction between personal factors, environmental influences, and behavior itself. He argues that behavior can be seen as not simply being shaped by an external stimuli, as behaviorists suggest, or solely by individual traits, as cognitive psychologists propose, but rather is influenced by these three factors in a dynamic and reciprocal way. What are the cognitive bases of stereotype formations? From a psychological perspective, stereotypes arise due to the brain's tendency to categorize information. According to cognitive psychology, humans process vast amounts of information daily, and to reduce cognitive load, they rely on schemas or mental frameworks that help interpret and predict the world. When applied to social groups, these schemas become stereotypes, providing generalized expectations about individuals based on their perceived membership in a particular group. A key cognitive process involved in stereotype formation is social categorization, where people classify others based on observable traits such as race, gender, age, or nationality. This automatic grouping simplifies social interactions but also leads to in-group favoritism and out-group bias. The in-group, one's own group, is often seen more favorably, while the out-group or the other groups is viewed as different, inferior, or even threatening. This division fosters generalized beliefs about groups, contributing to stereotypes. Additionally, the brain's illusory correlation effect plays a role in stereotype formation. These occurs when people associate unrelated variables, such as linking a minority group with negative behavior, simply because the behavior is more memorable or stands out. If one encounters an individual from a particular group behaving in a negative way, the memory of that event may be exaggerated, leading to the false perception that the entire group exhibits such behavior. Over time, this reinforcement strengthens stereotypes. Let's try to understand what are the social and cultural factors in stereotype formation. Well, stereotypes are not just the product of individual cognition, they are deeply influenced by social structures and cultural narratives. Societies construct stereotypes to define social roles, maintain the hierarchies, and establish cultural norms. From an early age, individuals absorb stereotypes through socialization, the process of learning societal norms, values, and beliefs. Families, schools, peer groups, and workplaces all contribute to the transmission of stereotypes. Basically, any customary situation at home is the very first exposure to stereotype. This is where we learn stereotypes from parents and significant others like relatives, neighbors, and even peers. For example, the traditional gender stereotypes, such as associating women with nurturing roles and men with leadership roles or roles of that as a provider, are reinforced through parental expectations, educational materials, and societal attitudes. Cultural myths and folklores also shape stereotypes. Narratives that depict certain groups in a particular way, such as the wise elder, the dangerous outsider, or the hard-working immigrant, become ingrained in the collective consciousness. These narratives are then passed down through generations, solidifying the stereotypes even if they do not accurately reflect the reality. We also have to understand the role of media in stereotype formation. One of the most powerful forces in shaping stereotypes is mass media. Newspapers, television, films, advertisements, and social media platforms frequently portray social groups in stereotypical ways, reinforcing existing biases. The repetition of these portrayals over time leads to the normalization of stereotypes, making them seem like objective truths rather than social constructs. The stimulus we receive from media in our day-to-day lives has increased to a greater proportions as we are now constantly in touch with some or the other forms of media in varying proportions. The common sense or commonly accepted norms and behaviors are conveyed to us through media, and we pick up cues from media to conduct ourselves in the society or even in the world in specific or general circumstances like how to behave in a funeral or what to have for breakfast. Media representations often focus on exaggerated or one-dimensional depiction of groups, which can lead to distorted perceptions. For instance, the portrayal of racial minorities as criminals, women as emotional beings, or older adults as weak and dependent reinforces societal biases. The lack of diverse and nuanced representations in media contributes to the persistence of stereotypes, as audiences rarely see alternative narratives that challenge these oversimplifications. Social media has further complicated stereotype formation by creating echo chambers where individuals are exposed primarily to informations that align with their pre-existing beliefs. Algorithm-driven content curation ensures that people see more of what they already agree with, reinforcing stereotypes and limited exposure to diverse perspectives. Misinformation and viral content can also spread stereotypes quickly, making them harder to dismantle. Let us look at the historical or even political factors in the formation of stereotypes. Stereotypes often emerge as tools for social control and maintenance of power. Throughout history, dominant groups have used stereotypes to justify discrimination, oppression, and exclusion of marginalized communities. Colonial powers, for example, portrayed indigenous population as uncivilized to legitimize conquest and forced assimilation. Similarly, political regimes have used stereotypes to scapegoat minority groups, fueling division and conflict. War, economic competition, and political propaganda frequently intensify stereotypes. During conflicts, opposing groups are often depicted through dehumanizing stereotypes to justify violence, exploitation, and reinforce national unity. The Cold War, for instance, saw the portrayal of communists as evil and threatening in Western media, reinforcing ideological divisions. Similarly, economic downturns can also lead to stereotypes about certain groups being responsible for the losses of jobs or shortages of resources, fostering resentment and discrimination. Let us now try to look into the different types and characteristics of stereotypes. Generally, stereotypes varies according to the place and the setup. Of them, some of the commonly found stereotypes will be discussed here. Gender profiling. In many societies or in workplaces, women are not as smart as men. Men are strong and smart. Sports performance of girls is not on par with the men. Women cannot excel when it comes to technology, etc., are some of the very common held stereotypes about men and women. An inherent bias is there towards women in many societies, countries, despite economic or social development. Sexual profiling. Now, there are a lot of stereotypical misconceptions about LGBT people. Mostly, it is thought that a transgender person does not do a dignified job. A man with a feminine touch is generally not appreciated amongst the common people. The other types of stereotype is racial profiling. Misconceptions or oversimplified view of people belonging to a particular race is called racial stereotype. Like, all Africans are good at sports, every African country is hot and dry, etc. At workplaces and in many other public places, there are many other types of stereotyping based on age, position, the designation of work, rural, urban, the skin color, size of the body, the facial features, language proficiency, etc. Then there is the cultural stereotype. Stereotypical perceptions about other cultures or even about a country as a whole also exist that could be really devastating many a times. The different types of cultural profiling can be based on national, religious, or community. To cite a few examples here, all Muslims are terrorists. Asians are good at maths. Americans are friendly and generous, but also arrogant and domineering, etc. In intercultural scenarios, individuals try to know the attitudes and personality of the people in their surrounding by looking out for evidences and also use the prevailing beliefs about the members of the particular cultural group that the person belongs to. These preconceived notions are called as cultural stereotypes. Prejudice is also a stereotypical perception. There are two types of cultural stereotype that one has about social groups. They are autostereotype and heterostereotypes. Stereotypes concerning one's own group are called autostereotype. These are idealized manifestation of one's own group and seldom are they negative or depreciatory. Heterostereotypes are again stereotypes about other social groups and are hardly positive. Heterostereotypes are preconceived ideas about the other social groups like the ethnic minorities of a nation or small groups such as intellectual classes. The popular view of stereotypes is mostly negative, but there are stereotypes with both negative and positive connotations. Heterostereotypes change with changing times and reflect the spirit of the period. Let us now try to move to our understanding of stereotypes as theorized by Walter Lippmann and Orrin Clapp. But before that, let us discuss Walter Lippmann and his understanding of stereotype through his works. Walter Lippmann was an influential American writer and political commentator. In his seminal work, Public Opinion, Lippmann speaks on primarily about the concept of public opinion in democratic theory. He developed the concepts for understanding how opinions formed through interactions between individuals and their social environments. These concepts were pseudo-environments and stereotypes. Walter Lippmann's theory on stereotypes and pseudo-environment is foundational in understanding how individuals perceive and interpret the world, especially through the influence of mass media. Lippmann argued that people do not experience reality directly, but instead construct mental representations of it based on the very limited information out there. Since the world is too vast and complex for any single person to fully comprehend, individuals rely on simplified mental images or stereotypes to categorize and make sense of their surrounding. These stereotypes act as cognitive shortcuts, allowing people to process information quickly without critically evaluating every new piece of data. They function as pictures in our head, as Lippmann would call it, shaping how we view social groups, institutions, and events. However, Lippmann pointed out that stereotypes are not formed through direct personal experience, but are instead shaped by societal influences such as culture, education, and most importantly, mass media. Let me quote Lippmann here. He writes, "I should like to pause at the idea of a pseudo-environment and ask what kind of an idea it is. I'm supposing that each person carries about with him a large and varying collection of images which in some way or other reflect, rearrange, simplify, elaborate, or distort the real environment with which he is connected. I'm supposing too that in different men and in the same men at different times and in respect to different images, the degree of credulity ranges from entirely unconscious identification of the image with the thing to a critical sense of just how credible the imaginary is." According to Lippmann, stereotypes are processes inherent in the perception of the world around us and not fixed as the etymology would suggest. The Greek etymology of the word stereotypes comes from the word stereos, meaning solid, and typos, meaning impression. He also states stereotype is inherently connected to our vision of the world when he writes, "For most of the part, we do not first see and then define. We define first and then see. In the great, blooming, buzzing confusion of the outer world, we pick out what our culture has already defined for us, and we tend to perceive that which we have picked out in the form stereotyped for us by our culture." According to Lippmann, stereotypes were necessary and universal aspect of human psychology in the big society. He mentions its utility as coping mechanisms for the hurried and multifarious nature of our modern world conditions. Stereotypes was defined as shared modes of attention, and apprehension that intercept information on its way to consciousness. Further, he states, and I quote, "This is the perfect stereotype. Its hallmark is that it precedes the use of reason, is a form of perception, imposes a certain character on the data of our senses before the data reach the intelligence." Lippmann wrote that the accepted types, the current patterns, the standard versions, were produced and modified through stereotype communication across sufficient pseudo environments. However, he also stressed that stereotypes could be contested and modified. Lippmann had a deep concern that technology would enable the reproduction of stereotypes with more power and with more ease, and which is a reality now that we see. Today, information is consumed through multiple mediated sources and in different groups of people have vastly different perception of the same event based on the media they consume. Stereotype continues to shape how various communities, cultures, and individuals are perceived and treated, reinforcing systemic biases and social divisions. People tend to think about stereotypes in isolation. However, Lippmann placed stereotypes at the very center of a deeper reflection on the foundations of public opinion from which stereotypes are indissociable. Let us now try to understand the meaning of stereotype as forwarded by Orrin E. Clapp. Orrin E. Clapp, an American sociologist, explored the role of stereotypes in shaping social order and maintaining control within society. His works, Heroes, Villains, and Fools as Agents of Social Contract, published in 1962, and Social Types, Process and Structure, published in 1964, provide a theoretical framework of how stereotypes function not just as mental shortcuts but as mechanisms of social regulation. Clapp's theory of stereotypes focuses on how societies create and maintain collective identities by categorizing individuals into recognizable types, which influence public perception and behavior. He argued that these social types, like heroes, villains, and fools, serve as tools for reinforcing societal norms, rewarding conformity, and punishing any form of deviance. Clapp viewed stereotype as more than just an oversimplified perception, but rather as dynamic social constructs that evolve through communication, particularly through mass media, literature, and public discourse. These stereotypes help societies to emphasize behavioral expectations by promoting certain figures as the role models while stigmatizing those who deviate from the societal norms or the path that is followed by the majority. The stereotypes function as a form of social control, ensuring that individuals align with dominant cultural values. In his work, Heroes, Villains, and Fools, Clapp examines three major archetypes that all societies use to categorize individuals and enforce social norms. The hero represents the ideal figure, someone who embodies the virtues and the values that the society admires in general. Through storytelling, media, and collective memory, society reinforces the idea that heroes are to be emulated, serving as a moral compass for all individuals. Opposite to the hero is the villain, who represents again the enemy of societal values. Villains are those who threaten to challenge the established order, engage in unethical behavior, or challenge the moral fabric of a community. For example, political opponents, criminals, or those who disrupt social harmony are often villainized in public discourse. The media plays a significant role in constructing and reinforcing villain stereotypes, shaping public perception in ways that serve the interest of those in power. The fool is again another archetype and a very essential social type in Clapp's framework, representing those who fail to conform to social expectations, not out of malice like villains, but due to ignorance, incompetence, or foolishness. Fools are often the subject of humor, ridicule, or pity. Clapp extends his analysis of stereotypes in his other work, Social Types, Process and Structure. Here he discusses how stereotypes are not fixed or static, but evolves through a process. He argued that the creation and reinforcement of social types follow specific patterns which is influenced by cultural shifts, the representation of media, and the political agenda. The process begins with naming, where the society identifies and labels individuals or groups according to the dominant stereotypes. Once the label is established, it influences public perception and determines how people interact with those who fit within the stereotype. Over time, these social types become embedded in the culture through repetition and reinforcement, making them difficult to change. However, Clapp also acknowledges that stereotypes can evolve as societal attitudes shift. A hero in one era can become a villain in another, depending on changing values and historical representations. Clapp's insights are relevant in understanding the role of stereotypes in social movements and cultural identity. Marginalized groups have historically been subjected to villain and fool stereotypes to justify discrimination, exploitation, and exclusion. Politicians and leaders often seek to position themselves as heroes, aligning with the values of their constituents, while casting their opponents as villains who threaten national stability or moral integrity. Similarly, individuals who challenge the status quo may be labeled as fools to discredit their ideas and minimize their influence. With the growth of social awareness, dominant narratives are challenged. Stereotypes are dismantled, allowing for newer representations to emerge. The re-evaluation of historical figures, the shift in how certain professions or communities are perceived, and the rise of new cultural heroes all highlight the dynamic nature of stereotypes. Meanwhile, social media has complicated the way stereotypes function. Unlike traditional media where narratives are controlled, digital platforms allow for general participation in shaping stereotypes. Individuals can challenge dominant representations. They can create alternate narratives and redefine social types in ways that were not possible in the past. However, social media also amplifies misinformation and reinforces echo chambers, making it easier for harmful stereotypes to spread and become entrenched. Clapp's theory highlights the complex relationship between stereotypes, social control, and cultural evolution. While stereotypes serve an organizing function in society, providing structure, predictability, they also reinforce power imbalance and limit the potential for diversity in thought and identity. By understanding how stereotypes are constructed, maintained, and challenged, individuals and institutions can work towards a more critical and inclusive approach to social categorization. With this, we come to the end of our discussion today. Thank you.